Thank you all for joining us today for our on-demand webinar, Forge Ahead or Fall Behind. We're going to be talking all things composable commerce today. The trend, is it going away? Is it here to stay? If it's right for you, when is the right time to do it? How to get started, and hopefully learn from some of my colleagues here from the pitfalls or some of the successful implementations we've seen over the last 18 months. So to introduce my colleagues real quick, I'll say my name first. I'm Alexis Hale. I'm the Senior Director of Product and Content Marketing here at Kibo Commerce. We are a e-commerce and order management platform. Joe Cicman is our Principal Analyst at Forrester. He's our guest speaker today, joining us to really lay down what the analysts think about this composable commerce trend, if we're going to call it a trend. We've got Brent Locks here from Builder.io. He's the president. Builder is a CMS, headless CMS partner that we work with. And we got Rajiv Das here from Ignitiv, who is a solution implementer to a lot of Kibo solutions, has worked with a lot of Kibo customers over the years. So thank you all so much for joining us. What you're about to see is a little bit of information from Forrester's point of view on composable commerce, what they've seen out in the market. And then we'll transition into more of a fireside chat about what we've seen, what we maybe agree on or don't agree on as it relates to composable commerce. So over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Alexis. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Cicman. I'm a principal analyst here at Forrester Research, and I cover digital experience platforms, marketplaces, and digital and B2B commerce. So today I'm going to take you through embracing the composable commerce trend. Now, I haven't slipped on ice in 35 years, and that's a knock-on effect of riding BMX. It gets me out of trouble in regular life. And my sports psychologist tells me they call it resilience. I build my own bikes. I select every part. Sometimes I modify those parts to fit my style, but I also practice a lot. And I work with coaches and partners. In fact, my contest coach is a 3-time X Games champion. What all this adds up to is that there's no amount of money anyone can spend on their gear to outride me. And I'm telling you this because it turns out that this also applies to digital experiences. Having digital skills is important because the new connected consumer poses a challenge for brands. And digital pros like you need to understand how your customers connect across 3 dimensions: devices, platforms, and channels, and then map your portfolio of experiences so that you're present where your customers are. And the model for thinking through your portfolio of experiences is something that we call the 3D connected consumer. 3 dimensions: devices, platforms, and channels now define how consumers are connected to the internet. And brands need to serve their customers wherever they are in these complex ecosystems. So you need to take a fresh look at how your customers connect as you craft your technology and platform portfolios. And that's because customers use combinations of devices, platforms, and channels that many firms don't support. You need to understand your customers' digital ecosystems in order to map your portfolio of experiences to how your particular customers connect. And that's not a trivial endeavor. Customer journeys are not simple, and brands aren't in control of how the customer goes through that journey. Your digital experience platform is the technology stack upon which you build experiences to support buyer journeys that are nonlinear and in the buyer's control. And the talent that you employ to build these journeys, your practitioners, they need no-code flexibility built into their tools because they don't have time to rely on developers. Now, that's a high bar for the technology to keep up with. But convenient technology packaging sometimes comes with trade-offs, some of which will cause you pain. So here's a metaphor. This is how legacy e-commerce systems used to be developed by vendors. By metaphor, this product shown here is integrated experience. It's easy to buy. It's tightly integrated. And in certain circumstances, it works great. Like in your garage when you're working on your bike, or maybe when you're waiting at the waiting room in an oil change shop. But you're not going to invite your friends over to watch The Mandalorian or the Super Bowl on it. And that's because as your audience gets larger, that screen is inadequate. But there's no way to add a larger screen to this DVD player. Oh, that's right. And The Mandalorian isn't distributed on DVD. So this is tightly integrated, but it hasn't kept up with the times. And it's not upgradable unless you rip and replace the entire thing. So why is it important to have flexibility in your technology? Well, it's because consumer and business buyers are changing. So for years, Forrester has been writing about how business buyers are behaving more and more like consumers every day. And some of this is the generational preferences of the millennials. In fact, 73% of millennials in the workforce are involved in purchasing decisions. But it's not limited to millennials. That boomer CFO, well, she's designing and ordering a new car online without ever visiting the dealer showroom. So any way you slice it, you are increasingly selling to business buyers with consumer-grade digital preferences, and they're levying those expectations on you. Companies of any background and any size can obsess over their customers. And these companies can rebalance their businesses to adapt as new opportunities come into view, or to be resilient when things like COVID disrupt their customers. And when you do this, you're like a pioneer, where being resourceful is more powerful than being full of resources. But what do I mean by powerful? Well, Forrester has an assessment. You answer questions about your business operations, and we categorize you into being along a spectrum toward customer obsession. The spectrum starts off in a stage called customer naive. And as your operations become more aligned around your customer, you become customer aware, then customer committed, then ultimately customer obsessed. And customer obsessed companies grow faster, on average twice as fast as their competitors that are less customer oriented, even in a recession. And that's important because after strong sales growth in 2020, US online sales growth in 2021 returned to pre-COVID-19 levels. Now, we expect online retail sales growth to slow from 2022 onward, and we expect US online retail sales to increase from 0.9 trillion in 2021 to 1.6 trillion in 2027. The fundamental growth drivers of online retail will continue. Those are lower prices, great product selection, faster delivery, and increased transaction convenience. So why is being customer obsessed important for B2B companies? Well, because our forecast says that US B2B e-commerce is going to amount to $3 trillion a year by 2027. And distributors are the ones who are going to capture the lion's share of that volume. So there's a big opportunity for you to grow, whether in B2C or in B2B. Now, getting customer experience right leads to loyalty, which is retention, enrichment, and advocacy, and that drives business growth. Getting customer experience wrong makes things go in the other direction, and that translates to pain not only for you, but it translates to pain for your customers as well. Friction leads to mistakes, delays, and decreased purchase confidence, and all that erodes loyalty. And throwing technology at a wall to see what sticks isn't the answer. Instead, you need a disciplined, methodical, and iterative approach to investing in the technology to support the digital experiences that you provide to your customers. So you might be asking, well, how do I formulate the right technology strategy to seize either this B2C or B2B opportunity? Well, your technology roadmap fulfills strategy with priorities set by business impact. So first, build a customer journey map, highlighting the moments of engagement. Then prioritize those moments and the processes based on the benefit to the customer and the value to you. And finally, pursue a two-path roadmap to move quickly while laying the foundations for the future. And you're going to continuously cycle through this loop as you learn more about how your customers traverse their journey. So to deliver differentiated experiences that deliver your business's unique value proposition, you need an architecture to your digital systems. And you're not going to develop it all in-house, and you're not going to buy it all from a single vendor. It'll be a blend. Now, let's look closer at how you need to think differently when working with modern technology. See, in the cloud, the traditional algebra of build versus buy doesn't work. And that's because of how modern software is written. Because it turns out, pure buy doesn't exist, and pure build also doesn't exist. That traditional build versus buy thinking underestimates the complexity and cost of packaged solutions, as well as the value of platforms in their ecosystems. And it overestimates the cost and complexity of modern custom development, as well as the similarities between firms in a truly adaptive digital environment. In the digital era, software is an expression of the business. Okay, so how should you think about customize? Well, that's when you buy a thing and you need the inner workings of the thing to work differently in order to match how you do business. So with the car example here, Honda Civics are popular with the tuner crowd because of how modifiable they are. And how you should think about composing? That's when you don't buy the mass manufactured discrete thing and change the way it works. Instead, you assemble your thing from specialty parts. You put those parts together in ways that optimize for what you're trying to achieve. And some parts you might even create yourself, and then you assemble those parts into a whole. Again, when you're composing, you're buying parts and assembling them. So I say that modern commerce is part of your digital experience platform. So what exactly is a digital experience platform? Well, here's Forrester's definition. Your digital experience platform provides the architectural foundation and modular services for developers and practitioners to create, orchestrate, and optimize digital journeys at scale to drive loyalty and new commerce outcomes across owned and third-party channels. Okay, but what's the benefit of this technology? Well, we can simplify the framing of that question and say that your digital experience platform is how you engage customers. The technology stack you assemble to deliver digital experiences is your digital experience platform. And you'll compose your own digital experience platform using parts from multiple vendors selected to deliver your distinct digital strategy. The platform that's right for you doesn't come pre-assembled out of the box. And even if it did, the risk of implementing it all at once is too great for your enterprise. Now, you'll need ordinary components of a DXP, such as content, customer data, and experience front end. You'll also need extraordinary components that are specific to your industry, like a travel booking engine instead of a retail card, or an electronic medical record system instead of an order history, and virtual interactive conference streams instead of static videos. So let's break down what some of those ordinary components are. Your practitioners work across a range of technology solutions, and Forrester distills digital experiences down to 4 solutions. So starting at the top, understanding the customer with data, creating the experience with content, tailoring that experience to fit the context with marketing, and finally, delivering value with commerce. So what do? And what do you buy? Well, think about your needs this way and assess yourself along 2 axes. That first is the vertical axis. And so is your development team expert in traditional on-prem tech for building large monolithic systems, or are they skilled in microservices, APIs, cloud native, serverless? Then along the horizontal axis, look at your digital strategy. Do you engage customers the way most other businesses engage them? In other words, is the digital strategy you're running pervasive, or is it differentiated? Now, if your dev skills are traditional and you're running a digital strategy that's pervasive, then there's probably a software package that's made exactly for you, like that all-in-one TV, DVD, VHS player. But if you have a differentiated digital strategy, then there's probably not one do-it-all system for you. So you'll need to buy those ordinary and extraordinary components and then compose them into a platform that meets the needs of your business. And since it's 2023, those components will be built on cloud-native technology, and they'll be built to interoperate with one another following cloud-native principles. So stay tuned, because there's a middle ground here that we're going to get into during the fireside chat. Okay, so it's not a pre-integrated, tightly coupled, all-in-one, do-it-all system for your particular digital strategy. Then what exactly is your digital experience platform? Well, my research concluded that an enterprise's digital experience platform is a system of applications and their underlying platforms brought together by various agencies and vendors, bound by APIs and events, connected through good data, which provides the foundation for experiences and apps to be rapidly built on top. Now, over time, as you digitalize more and more of your business's distinct value proposition, you're going to need to reach farther and farther into the back office systems that you use to operate your business. And bringing those systems into the mix, in other words, going far beyond content and commerce, will force you to think about your unification plans from a frame of what we call an experience architecture. And your DXP charts the course to front office, back office unity under an experience architecture. Now, embracing the idea of a composed digital experience platform forces you to think more expansively than just implementing a discrete platform in a box. You're going to source technology parts when you need them, not when your budget cycles calls for you to do so. You'll source parts from many more vendors than your procurement team is comfortable with, and you'll build modern web apps for content and interactive experiences, and you'll use the web for scale. You'll use the edge for scale. So what do great companies do with their digital experience platform? Well, customer-obsessed businesses discover what their customers consider to be the most valuable proposition by observing them, by talking to them, and by experimenting with the digital experiences until they see uptake and subsequent improvement in their customers' lives. Now, I published a case study about some of these companies recently, and in each of the cases, they had no idea what they were going to build when they started. But they started by listening to their customers, and then they prototyped, and then they worked with their customers until their customers' problem was solved. And then they scaled, and then they got the loyalty to drive sales volume. And this is what we mean when we say that customer-obsessed businesses with a future-fit technology strategy build platforms to deliver their business's distinct value proposition. You simply cannot buy that off the shelf from one vendor. You have to buy components and assemble them. You have to compose them and modify some to fit your style. And you have to make some of those components yourself. That's why I told you I build my own bikes. My bike is my platform, and you're going to build your platform that expresses your unique greatness as a business. So compose your own digital platform from parts that you source from vendors, plus some of your own parts. Use that to digitalize your business's distinct value proposition, leverage partners along the way, and grow by being customer obsessed. Now, your parents were not the digital generation. You are facing generational challenges. Being digital is a generational coming of age challenge. And I encourage you to take this step like it's your rite of passage. It's just like riding a bike. And with that, thanks for your attention. And now we're going to go to have a fireside chat. Okay, everybody. Now we're going to do fireside chat. We've got folks from Kibo and Ignitiv and Builder. And so one at a time, why don't you introduce yourselves to the audience?
I'll go first. I'm Alexis Hale from Kibo Commerce. I'm the Senior Director of Product and Content Marketing here at Kibo. Kibo is a digital commerce platform, e-commerce order management subscriptions that is composable, but also seeks to balance that with functionality and ease of use for the non-technical practitioners. Did I get that term right, Joe?
Yes.
Non-technical practitioners. Thanks. Over to you, Ignitiv.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rajiv Das. I'm the CEO of Ignitiv. Ignitiv is an SI with a focus on e-commerce, and we work across industries, across all kinds of B2B and B2C use cases. And finally, we are partners of Kibo and Builder.
Great. My turn. My name is Brent Locks. I am a co-founder and president at Builder.io. We sit within, and we'll talk about this a bit more, I'm sure, we sit within the content slot within that digital experience platform that Joe was talking about. What we really do uniquely is we enable organizations to visually build and manage content and digital experiences. And it really is a collaboration tool that works for both those practitioners that Alexis was talking about, as well as the IT and engineering side of an organization as well too.
All right, that's great. So you three have partnered up on something, and why don't I let you tell the audience what you've done and why you've done it?
I can kind of jump in there if my pals here will also help me out. So I kind of want to address something that I saw in your presentation earlier, which was a lot of argument against the term, I'll call it the term, out of the box application. And so while we agree with the concept that you're not going to get everything from one vendor, one solution, what have you, out of the box, what we have brought together is, if you will, an out of the box solution to a piece of this composable commerce puzzle. And so Kibo acts as the digital commerce platform, the back end, if you will, for all of the commerce services. Builder is the CMS that kind of holds all the content and commerce glued together. And then Ignitiv is one of our SI partners, but they've also taken it a step further and built out an omni-channel storefront for both B2B and B2C, so that for those in the market that are just now coming onto the composable scene, just now looking at headless, we seek to make it easier for them to get there in a out of the box package solution.
So from our perspective as an SI, the way we see this is what we have for our customers is an accelerator. You don't start everything from the ground up, which is precisely why services from Kibo and services from builder are being used to compose an experience that is useful for our customers. What we're doing is creating the 60-70% common set of services that will apply across a number of customers, and build into an accelerator that can be used for creating the distinctive experiences that each customers will need, and for ensuring that their customer journeys and the experiences required by the customers are met. It gives us a starting point that it moves the starting point to much further ahead, and it results in cost savings. It results in time to market, a faster time to market as well.
Cool. And yeah, Builder, as I mentioned, sits within, and Joe showed a diagram of kind of the four pieces, and we very much sit in that content piece. Of course, it all needs to be orchestrated and connected together, because the data needs to be informing the content strategy. That content needs to be leveraged for the marketing channel to personalize for different audiences, and of course work seamlessly with the commerce angle as well too. And so that's really what we're kind of jointly here doing together. What Builder does uniquely in that content slot is kind of sit in that messy middle of how do you maintain the kind of, Composable's a very, let's say, kind of a technical term, and I think people think about it from a technical means, but there's clearly, the point of it is to drive business value, as Joe went through. And so what we do is sort of sit in that middle of how do you provide the developer control or the right developer experience, but give the practitioners, the business team, the autonomy to move really quickly. Because when you first take this jump, you're going to do what you think makes the most sense today. But customer expectations are constantly changing and constantly evolving. And so you've got to keep up with that by iterating and trying and creating new experiences and trying new things. And what we don't want to see is we don't want to see one side of an organization kind of blocking or bottlenecking another side of the organization. And so we sit in that content piece to really try to maintain a collaborative edge and allow the practitioners to move really quickly without constantly having to rely on developers, but make the most out of what the developers have built and what they've orchestrated along the way. I want to transition maybe a little bit to another question, and maybe Joe, I'm going to point this back at you, because as I mentioned, Composable is kind of a technical term. It's something that has really become at least very trendy as a term. I think we're all seeing it put into practice. And so I guess I would love to hear from your angle, is it truly a trend, or are you seeing a permanent shift? Of course, I have a point of view where I definitely have seen this evolve into, truly a shift. I think it will continue to evolve and maintain its own trend with various folks like us talking about it on an ongoing basis. But as this sort of shift has been happening and folks have adopted it, what are you hearing, given kind of the variety of folks that you talk to, around their goals or their reasons to really make that leap? And maybe where have maybe they fallen a little bit short from your point of view?
Yeah, so I'll hit the one about, is it a trend or a permanent shift? I would say ultimately I think it's going to be a permanent shift, but there's going to be something that comes after Composable. We're going to live in a post-Composable world as soon as we figure out what the shortfalls are and then how to solve those shortfalls. But the way I see Composable is it's a market response, and it's a response to the market problems of a constantly changing consumer. And so for brands, the mission is to discover that product market fit for experiences that consumers are going to respond to. And so you've got to iterate to find what's the next thing that your customers are responding to. You have to be able to go quickly through that, and you can't do that reliably with like 6 months, 6 month long dev cycles. So you have to be able to iterate. And it's also the problem to where great technology comes from. And so there's lots of startups and lots of new sources for where this great technology is going to come from. And so you need to be able to snap that in to your stack. And really, I would say Composable is how modern software is built. And so if you look at the firms that are building great software, look at Amazon, look at Facebook, behind the scenes, they're following these principles. So that's why I think that it's actually more of a much longer term shift than just a flashy trend. There's another question that you had in there, which was about some of the goals that my enterprise clients have for adopting this. And so when I have talked with enterprises that have gone composable, it's so that their technology teams can keep up with the ambitions of their digital strategists. So it's the digital strategies that are putting the pressure on the tech teams, and the tech teams are pulling their hair out saying, how do I even keep up with this? And the answer is, well, when they adapt themselves, structurally in the organization, and they take advantage of composable tech, then they can keep up with it. And then finally, you mentioned something about resistance, and what I would say is, in some cases, I have heard one really good reason to resist composable, and that is if your digital strategy is something that you can buy out of the box right now. If you can go and buy one piece of software that does everything you need, go do that. No sense reinventing the wheel. The other reasons that I've heard of resistance that I don't necessarily totally disagree with, but I understand, is that those are driven by fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So if a technology organization just is not prepared for composable, meaning that they're not skilled in the tech, they're not organized for agile, they don't have a platform product team, they should resist composable. And while they're resisting composable, they should work with experts, partners, to build the commitment to ready themselves. And then once they're ready, they can take on composable. So to draw a metaphor, it's like asking your teenager to develop a sense of responsibility, good judgment, strong skills, and a sense of purpose before you hand them the keys to a Ferrari, because that's a very powerful piece of equipment, and it has to be operated in the hands of a skilled operator.
Rajiv, you ought to like that answer. If your strategy doesn't dictate it, just go find something out of the box that works for you, because that is essentially what everyone did when the monoliths were there, right? It worked for everyone. Just go buy it out of the box, and that's kept you in business for 20 years. So that should be music to any SI's ears.
I don't agree. I don't agree for the simple reason that a monolithic architecture will mean, for most companies that want a differentiated strategy, I would think that almost every company would want some kind of differentiation in their digital efforts. The degree or the pace of change that you can bring about with a monolithic architecture is very limited. And therefore, the pressures on the team is extremely high to make those changes. And very often, the platform itself becomes a undermining factor in the growth of the business. So from an SI perspective, being able to deliver solutions that work is important. Some of the legacy monolithic architectures for many use cases just doesn't cut it anymore. One simple exercise, and I'd say this from a front-end experience, in terms of page load speeds, it's one part of the whole puzzle, but if you can't deliver it with a dated legacy architecture, you just can't deliver it. You have to work in a different model, and that means separating out the front end from the back end, using modern frameworks for developing the front end. And that is where you have to come in and see composable for what it is, and look at legacy for what it used to be good for earlier times, but no longer serves the purpose.
Yeah, I think that there is a case for us, and I think none of us deal with these people, so that's probably why we're not talking about, but there is a case for a pure play e-tailer that doesn't have a complicated strategy right now, and there are some out-of-the-box solutions out there that will get them up and running very quickly. I think the caution in that is the caution that we give everybody, which is that's your strategy today. Just get the job done. what about tomorrow and thinking about in the future. So there's certainly ways to do both, to investigate, okay, out of the box solutions or the all-in-one solutions that meet 99% of my requirements. If we're going to put on the lens of the future flexibility, which one's going to meet those requirements too? And if you don't know what you don't know about what's coming down the pike in the future, because none of us have the crystal ball, if you do, tell me. It is important to understand some of these concepts, even if you don't plan on taking advantage of it right now. The thing that we're seeing with composable commerce is the wide variety of what people consider composable commerce to be in the first place. Some people think composable commerce is just go out and buy a bunch of microservices and string those things together to make your perfect commerce platform. Or some people are looking at the granularity a little bit different. You're going to work with 20 vendors or 7 vendors or whatever that might look like. And in that, I think, is also where we see kind of some of the pushback. Joe, you had a slide earlier that showed kind of a laundry list of things that need to come together for this: the set of applications bound by APIs and events, connected through good data, the foundation for experience, and the ability to build apps on top of that. This is not, when we think of the word trend, we think it's going to kind of come and go. This isn't sort of a one and done thing. This isn't like the end all be all to digital transformation. It is an ongoing process. And so I kind of even hate the word trend because it's almost like an identity. And I think that the trend of it is the naming convention. That's going to change. It always does. But let's be real. What is the concept of composable commerce today has existed for many, many years. Now it's taken shape as technology has taken shape. But this idea of bringing all these components together and having flexible technology, like, that's not new, right? And so when we see kind of the variance in the market of what people want, it's really a variance of like, how much work do I want to take on right now versus like, how much work do I want to take on in the future, and where do I draw the line in that? And I think that kind of points back to that one slide that you had that was sort of the, it wasn't a circle, but I kind of wanted it to be. There was kind of 3 boxes there of what to focus on, starting with the customers and then kind of moving forward. And that's really, well, that's what we're seeing in the market the most. There's plenty of customers that come to us that want to know exactly how much they can just get out of the box. And then they have these key areas that they know they need to build in, and that's great. And then there's other customers that come to us and go, we need to replace the whole dang thing. Please tell us where to start, right? And so there's just so much variance. And I think it comes down to the definition or the lack thereof of what everyone calls composable commerce.
Yeah, I like you called it an identity. I think the term composable feels like an identity too. And I kind of don't love it. I think it goes back to, I know this sounds, maybe a little cheesy, but it goes back to what Joe said. It's actually about business impact. I don't like when people like ask me, should I be composable or monolithic? That's just that doesn't make any sense. It's actually about like, what problems are you facing? And I have no doubt, I agree with Rajiv. I can tell you 10 things that's better about composable than monolithic, but those might not matter to you. They might not have an impact today. And sure, they may have an impact tomorrow, but again, you got to survive today sometimes to even get to tomorrow. And so, Joe talked about fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD. I love that line. I think there's FUD on both sides. I think there's FUD on, the fear, uncertainty, doubt of taking the leap. I think there's a fear, uncertainty, doubt also of like, your monolithic is bad for you. And I think we have to avoid that angle as well, because I think there's tons of brands where those solutions make great sense for them in terms of what their priorities and what their objectives are today. And as they continue to scale and develop and evolve their strategy, they're going to have to diversify even more. And that diversification and those growing needs and that evolving strategy is where I think composability will naturally come in. But it needs to be approached by a problem or an opportunity and having a business impact, and not about like architecture and technology, because that's where I have seen some of these things fail. And so, the idea being that the developer sees these problems and wants to solve from a technology perspective, but doesn't actually bring the practitioner, the marketing side along. I mean, that's one example that, we have seen, a failure to launch, for lack of a better word. And it's really important that both those sides are together, and what those two sides should be collaborating on is what Joe kind of walked through, those same squares that you talked about, Alexis, which is, what is the strategy? What are the problems we're trying to solve? And how do we take a path there? And I love the dual path is incrementality is key. There are things that you could start doing today that could probably have a really big impact that sets you on a trajectory to get there. And so I think that's what we're trying to do with this solution, a bit, is to try to provide a lot of the really important lowest common denominators, but making it very possible to kind of eject or add on and bring other pieces in, because we know that the problems or the opportunities that business are trying to capture can be different across the board. And we want to make it really easy to get the most common capability in things like commerce, things like content, but be able to take that a step further, when the time comes. I'd be curious, I like the, just some of the examples or stories. Where have any of you all kind of seen other aspects of the failure to launch or things maybe not necessarily going according to plan when moving on this journey? Because I think that's where, if we can help people, it'd be potentially is to try to navigate this a little bit better. Obviously, we're here to we have our solution, which we think is one avenue to go. But yeah, I'm curious where other people have seen things not go quite according to plan on their composable journey.
When you were talking there, I was kind of thinking of, I've seen this multiple places, but this idea of a pendulum swing from, monolith to usually over here you see microservices, composable, what have you. It's one big giant blob and then a bunch of tiny little components. And I think what we've all come together to do is sort of kind of meet in the middle, without the restrictions of that are imposed by either side. And so when I think about, I've got one customer in my head in particular, and it's a customer of all of ours, but I'll keep their name out of this because they tried to go headless. Composable really wasn't something that came out of their mouths, but that was the goals of that were what they wanted. But they really wanted to start out with going headless, separating the front from the back, and they tried for 18 months to go headless on a platform, coming off of a platform that was really the all-in-one monolith, very marketer friendly, very rigid, and they failed to launch. After 18 months, they scrapped that. And I think in my head, when I think about them, they swung that pendulum too far. And what they really needed was something somewhere in the middle that gave them all the flexibility and freedom, or future freedom, if you will. They don't really need that right now, but they will in the future, to do some of the things in the future. So not be held back by that monolith, but not all the complication of putting all the pieces together, or the management or the hosting of it, some of the things that people don't really even think about. Just like that sentence in Joe's slide that says bound together by APIs, connected through good data. That is hard, that's difficult. And that was some of the stuff that they kind of struggled with. And so when I think about all of us coming together, and I think about Joe's kind of Foursquare, and we can pull that one back up, Joe, because I think you had maybe a little correction for us in that. But when I think about that, I'm like, no, there's something in the middle there. There's a middle ground there. And I really think, and feel free to argue with me, but I think that that's the value that the three of us have come together and put together for people, because the flexibility and the freedom are still there, but the complication of going out and doing all this yourself is not there. And that's what I see our benefit as. And that's also what I see kind of a fix to what I know to be a very true story about a failure to launch and a lot of lost money and time on the table.
Yeah, this middle ground. As I looked out at the market, I was looking for something that was modern, cloud native, that was pre-assembled, but could also be broken then apart and used, as an accelerator. And it sounds somewhat familiar to what you guys were describing that you had done.
Yeah, I think that I love this diagram, and I think that middle part is actually the most challenging piece. And my fear is that people look at that middle, and I'm going to use a term like shop in a box, right? And that's what we don't want. We don't want it to simply say that we're trying our best to take the best of composability and tightly couple it together. It is the more pre-composed, pre-orchestrated, but fully ejectable, and importantly, it's more hopefully for adding on. it's really more of the starting point of lowest common denominators and bringing more onto that as your digital strategy needs. But I think people get too hung up on each side of the spectrum. And I'm totally with what Alexa was saying too, is like, yeah, the crazy microservice approach to me is scary. I would not recommend many people go that. And I think we all actually have probably stories of companies that went that approach and went too far. And then on the flip side, we've talked about the monolith. And so this middle ground, I think, is the holy grail. But I think it's really about trying to make it so that you can kind of easily move across that broad middle spectrum as much as you need to, as opposed to trying to sort of cement some perfect spot. And hopefully we've taken a stab at doing that with what we've pulled together, the three of us.
Well, and Rajiv, you would know
Yeah.
best. I mean, I feel like when people watch stuff like this, they're like, oh, there's these two vendors sitting here trying to like pitch their product, right? But how can they call themselves composable if it's all packaged, and how flexible is it? Like, that's your world. Can you take us apart? Are we what we say that we are? I mean, you're the one that sort of kind of orchestrated these things together to work together. But from your point of view, when you hear vendors like us talking like this, do you agree that we meet the middle ground? Do we offer the ultimate flexibility?
I agree, and that's why we are here at the table. It is the middle ground. Why? Because there are certain things you don't want to, always where there is an experimentation, there is a certain base that you don't experiment with in terms of building from the ground up. You have commerce services, you have content services, those are available. And that's the starting point for most customers. At the end of the day, however, when they're trying to build differentiated experiences, and I'll take a simple example in the case of B2B commerce, registering a new customer. You would think the story will end with both the content and the commerce platform. There is a well-designed registration page that takes it to registering the customer on the from a commerce service perspective. But it goes beyond that. It goes back to the ERP, and therefore what we discovered with at least two of our customers, where you have to have those services available from the ERP side to talk to them, send the new customer data back to them. They go through a process of ratifying that customer and send a confirmation back, after which a number of things happen on the digital experience platform. So there is orchestration that's happening between all the different services, if you may. Having a top of the line services or microservices driven commerce platform, which is a combination of services around commerce and a combination of services around content. What you do is you have an architecture that is flexible enough to then go and pick a number of other services that are required for your differentiated platform. And we think that is extremely useful for customers, because as their business requirements come up, or as new opportunities for new experiences come up because of this new service that's available in the market, your digital experience platform is able to bring that in quickly. And tomorrow, when the time is for a different service, you can throw the old one out and bring the new one in fairly quickly. And I think that is why it is useful to have a starting point which includes a core platform on the commerce side and a core platform on the content side.
Yeah, I think on the question of like, what have we seen? I think you only asked about failure, Brent, but I'll tell a quick success story too. And it happens to be a distributor, which you already predicted, Joe, that those guys would get ahead. And we share a common distributor customer. And when I think about them, when they came to us, they had a lot of ideas of what they wanted to do, but they first started with actually surveying their customers, asking their customers, hey, what do you expect from us when it comes to a commerce platform? And what these guys, very technical, super sharp guys, wanted to do was not exactly in alignment with what their customers said they wanted. So they kind of had to pivot. So what was going to be phase one then became phase three for these guys. And the way that they sort of approached it was hey, what can we get away with that's good enough for now, that's going to get us, over the goal line for the next 18 months. An example was they thought they needed to buy a PIM, a best of breed PIM. And they knew that eventually, as they continued to acquire businesses, product catalogs got bigger, that might be something that they needed. But they decided to put that down in phase 3 and looked at, okay, what catalog capabilities work today? What can we use today? And then I need to know that I got the flexibility to replace just the PIM piece of this when I want to keep some of these other pieces in there later on in the future. And so I think that the difference in my mind between those two teams, the B2C story I told earlier, that company is much larger. They had a much bigger team. This B2B group, much smaller team. They think they have 5 people total. But the thing that they did right, and it just points back to what you showed on that screen, Joe, was starting with customer obsession. And that's what this company is kind of known for. And that's exactly where they started. And it actually led them down a path that they would not have taken on their own if they just would have been approaching this either from an architectural standpoint or just from a sole technical standpoint in terms of like, what gaps do we even have in our technology stack? Because what the customers said they wanted was actually a lot simpler than what these guys were thinking about building in the first place.
It's a great story. I feel like that comes up a lot where what we think we need is maybe not quite correct. And so that's why I go back to, we both said it, that I think that slide that Joe had, where it shows 3 boxes, is just really important. You've got to go through the cycles and do that, because there's probably a much quicker, much faster way of getting to your intended goal. And I'll say whether it is maintaining on your current, if it happens to be a monolithic stack, or starting on that composable journey. It's just being really, really thoughtful about that, because there's so many directions that we can really go. Yeah, that's the guy.
You're building this technology to serve your customers, and so your North Star has to be your customers. You got to start there. I use this diagram quite a lot with my clients. Because I work with CIOs, and they'll say, "Hey, Joe, look, I need a roadmap. I need a roadmap." And they'll say, "All right, what are you building?" They're like, "Well, we need a compelling roadmap to do great things." I'm like, what things? And so it's very easy to overlook. If you're the technology person, it's very easy to overlook that you are in service to your customers. And you really have to have strong CX or marketing function to understand your customers. And so there's such an important relationship between the technology side and the marketing customer side of a business. You have to have that alignment. And when you have that alignment, then everything that's going to be on your technology roadmap, because it's going to be informed by what your customers need. And every item in that roadmap, that middle part, that business impact, you can look at that as like a backlog. The business value of every single thing that you have to do. And so you never fall into these problems of, oh, well, I can't justify the expense, because the expense, the R, the return before you make the investment.
100%.
Hey, I'm kind of curious on that 4x4, that slide. I have a love-hate relationship with that. I think we talked about that before. I think Brent's on my team with that one too. And I think it comes down to those words, pervasive versus differentiated. And I'm actually curious, Rajiv, from your point of view, we've worked on a lot of really different clients together, right? And so every single one of them would tell you that they've got a differentiated strategy. But from your point of view, from an SI who implements the same technology in different ways over and over, what is an example of like a truly differentiated digital strategy in your mind where you would really need to consider truly building?
I mean, is there a case where it is completely differentiated from the ground up? No, there is. I would think that much of every organization's approach would be, there is a base of things that is not really differentiated. There's a core plumbing of your commerce platform that is common across every other customer in that space. And then there is a top, and the top can be 5% or 20% or 30%. That is differentiated. That's the way we see with our customers. That's the approach that is taken. Now, how you go after that 20-30% will probably determine whether you are successful in the long run or not. And in this, what we have seen is they look at the differentiation in terms of, I think Joe was referring to the 3D, what kind of experiences you have across devices and channels. Much of that, the data that is required for those experiences, those three things, will determine whether a monolithic platform will work for them, or you really need a composable architecture, because these things are changing as customer preferences change, as new services come to play in the market, and they come fairly rapidly, and the customer preferences also change fairly quickly. That top 20-30% is in a lot of flux at any given point of time. The one thing that an organization has to account for itself is how much do they want to play in the top 20-30%. How do they see growth of their business, because that will be determined by how they play in the top 20-30%. That's how we would see things.
Yeah, and I'm trying not to geek out too much on this, but if you think about an equation where the outcome or the kind of dependent variable of the equation is delivering customer value, it's like, well, what are all the variables that you think you need to do to achieve that optimal outcome? And those variables are the various pieces of your strategy. And there are an endless number of variables. And I totally agree with Rajiv. I think a lot of those are probably very similar across plans. But there's going to be some variables that are probably distinct to you. And more likely, it's going to be how you combine some of these variables together to deliver that value that's going to be distinct and unique to you. And that's going to be your competitive advantage. And I think that's where the composability piece from a technical perspective, has a lot of value. But you've got to have, we talk a lot about people, process, and technology. And I think we're talking a lot about technology. But from our perspective, Builder.io, I think the people side is one of the most important pieces. Not to go back to what Joe just said of like, first you got to bring both sides together to be, agreement in terms of what is delivering customer value, right? What is the actual business impact? And then also on that plan and making sure you have the right resources that have the capabilities, that have the know-how, or bring those people in externally through partners, to be able to get there. And so it really isn't this, pure technology solution. It really is also just making sure that you have the right people involved, hopefully, especially internally, but as necessary, bringing, the external folks in, whether those are, the SIs of the world, the vendors of the world who also know a lot about the space. But you've got to really think about this more holistically than just the technology.
You agree?
Yeah, bring your commerce psychologist in, just like Joe brings his sports psychologist in, right? I was going to question if you actually had a sports psychologist there, Joe, when you mentioned that at the beginning, but I did like the way that we started this entire thing out, which was kind of talking about the team of people that comes together. And I think that commerce is really no different. Like, it really does take a village. And so while we have competitors in the market, there's days when those competitors are also vendors that we integrate with. There's days that they may be looking at us versus another technology that wouldn't even show up in one of the wave evaluations together, but they're pitting us together because what they're trying to solve for is the same. And so, all that to say, I would say that I think I was thinking earlier about, is this a trend? Is composable a trend? Is it a permanent shift? And I thought, even if it was going to be a trend, I promise that the vendors that are out there are not going to let this trend die, because it's not just good for the customers, our customers, the end customer, the customer experience, but it's actually good for the vendors too. I think that there's a lot of people that are entering the market with new and interesting technologies that wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for this sort of shift towards this mindset that composability brings.
Yeah, and let me weigh in on that. So first off, yes, I do have a sports psychologist. He wrote the book Sports Psychology for Dummies. Total coincidence that he lives in Columbus. True story. But let me tell you how to think about composable technology from the perspective of the vendors using that as the basis for their software. So cloud native. If you're buying tech and you have two vendors and they're showing you their roadmaps probably will be pretty similar, probably. But if you look at their release notes, you will see a massive difference. And the vendors who have cloud native architecture are delivering code way faster, and they're delivering code without upgrade requirement. As a tech buyer, imagine that you could do that with your own experiences. That's how fast.
Yeah, if I can add, I think, Joe, you mentioned the tech companies out here in the Bay Area or elsewhere. That's how they deliver their software. It is, you built a core platform and you are releasing very often, very quickly, in small increments. And so you're experimenting a lot, and therefore you know what is working, what is not working pretty early, and you're pivoting as fast as possible. That is a similar kind of a platform enablement that is required in the commerce world, where marketers can bring site refreshes on demand in real time, and that services are available for them to juggle and put together so that they can create the experiences, newer experiences for their customers, and they know quickly what works, what doesn't work, and therefore they will fail in something and improve. That one single thing is the most important reason why Composable makes for a better architecture than the monolithic legacy system. So that's what I wanted to add.
Oh yeah, the cost of experimenting goes way down. You can do way more experiments. You can get to product market fit way faster.
Yeah, and I know everyone on this call probably knows it, but React is the most popular web framework on the planet. It is a component-based framework, and it came out of Facebook. The company whose mantra was move fast and break things. I don't think they want to break things much anymore, but it was moving fast. The release notes, it's all related, velocity. This isn't by coincidence. And so I think Composable is been around for a long time. I think it's, commerce is probably arguably a late adopter relative to some other industries to it. But it's a proven technology, from that perspective. But again, it's when to apply that technology that's the most important thing, and that we want people to really think about as they kind of postulate and potentially plan that digital transformation.
Well, thank you guys so much for hopping on today. I think that there was quite a bit to take away from this. And if everyone didn't hear anything else, if you were confused about whether or not your vendor is truly composable, go check out their release notes. Don't rely on just their roadmap. That's from Joe Cicman himself. So thank you all for joining us today. Have a wonderful one.